And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk. Spartans with a big win today over Minnesota here at the Breslin Center. Michigan State improves to 18-2, 9-0 in the Big Ten. They beat Minnesota 73-51. Many of you saw it, and some of you may not have. It's on Peacock tonight, Paul. What, 13 straight. Michigan State's 18-2. Matt Wenzel from MLive reported, he mentioned it in the press conference. I'll give him credit for it. First time Izzo's ever gone undefeated in December and January. We're looking that up right now. Good on Matt getting that stat, but that is something. Now, Michigan State's not had the hardest schedule, but they've gone through it without stubbing their toe, and they've won a lot of these games somewhat comfortably, and Izzo's trying to get more and more out of them because he's got to find something to coach, and there's plenty to coach out there, but 13 straight, 18-2, 9-0, Paul Konyndyk.
Yeah, it's not easy. You know, I'm tired of making excuses for Michigan State and saying they haven't played a tough schedule when you see teams stubbing their toe left and right in the Big Ten. You know, going down to Northwestern and winning at Northwestern, a team who would beat you, a team who had more wins over top 25 opponents in their home gym. When Michigan State played them, had won 4 out of 6 against Michigan State. Going down to Ohio State and playing a really good game on both ends of the floor down there. And then, like you said, not stubbing your toe. And this is a game that...
Rutgers game wasn't easy.
Yeah, and it's it's not about... To some extent, it's about what teams have in terms of record-wise. But basketball is still a game of matchups. And you look at what Minnesota has in Dawson Garcia when he plays well. That's a guy who's as good as anybody in the country and as tough as anybody to match up against. And, yeah, you can say, well, they just played Ace Bailey, but Ace Bailey is 18 years old. He's not Dawson Garcia, who's in his 20s, has seen everything. And they run really good stuff to get him the ball. They actually run stuff. Rutgers, I love what Steve Michael's done on that program, but they don't run stuff all the time. It's like a lot of, on offense at least, it's not a lot of set plays. Minnesota does a good job with their set plays. They do a good job with their inbounds plays. And this is a tough game. Just human nature aspect. Michigan State won very easily on the road, won by 18 points, in which they, stomped them out of the gym with 27 transition points. So human nature being what it is, you always expect these games to be closer in the rematch, even if it's on your home floor. And I thought Minnesota played a lot better in a lot of ways than they did in the first game in terms of what they did on defense and how they competed. But Michigan State used probably one of their best defensive efforts that I can remember in a long time. Izzo said it was one of the best that he's ever seen in the first half. But that was darn good defense, and it made all the difference in the world for Michigan State to get a big home win. It's always good to sweep a series, but I thought Michigan State did exactly what they had to do in a game like this to set themselves up for a road trip moving forward.
It was 36-16 at halftime. And Michigan State had forced 3 shot clock violations in the first half. I think Minnesota shot 31% in the first half. And Minnesota coach Ben Johnson said something along the lines of they really made it difficult for us, Minnesota, to get into our stuff. I think Izzo made that comment, paraphrasing what some of the Minnesota people told him after the game. So the defense was strong. Garcia's great. Is a great test for Michigan State, 2 games in a row to face somebody like that, because one of the weaknesses coming into the season was, does Michigan State have somebody that can guard a mismatch 4? We've been watching that all season. The first time they played Minnesota, Kohler did a pretty good job against Garcia. That was a nice sign for this team. In this game, Garcia started to get hot in the second half. The game was pretty much decided, and they made a little bit of a run cutting it down to 13 points. But Garcia started just going ahead and looking for a shot and finding a shot and scoring. Scored against Carson Cooper a couple times. One time drove against Cooper after Cooper got knocked off balance a little bit. But when it was cut down to about 13 or 15 or so, Michigan State put Cohen Carr on Garcia, something they did not do in the first game. Something that they did with a lot of success against Ace Bailey and the Rutgers game. So that's something they had in their hand, in their back pocket, that they would go to if they had to. That's something from a developmental standpoint as they move forward in the season. Cohen Carr at 6'5", 6'5.5". If this had been a tight game, would they have put Carr on Garcia? I don't know, but that's a card that they have, because 2 months ago, Carr has all that horsepower, all that ability, but hadn't quite totally locked into all the defensive concepts. He's coming along, and sometimes those defensive players can go from suspect to liabilities to good to great, like quickly. Remember when Morris Peterson couldn't play defense? By the end of his career, he was doing some stopper rolls on people. And Brandon Dawson, it took him a while. Cohen Carr is making progress, and they went to him late in this game when no one else was paying attention. But they went with Carr on him, and they tried to post Carr up with Garcia. And Garcia had trouble getting post touches against that. I wanted to see what that would look like. Garcia posting up against Carr, but it never quite happened. But these are things, when you get into February and you got 30 games to get your crap together, that's one of those things Michigan State is kind of filing in there that can make them a little more versatile and potentially upset-proof as you head toward March.
One of the things I asked Cohen Carr on Media Day, it seems like forever ago, is, I wanted to get a feel for how he felt his on-ball defense was progressing. And, because I thought it was a big weakness of his. He had some big shot block moments as a true freshman, but the on-ball stuff, it's totally different. What Michigan State does but just watching him from the beginning of the season, I didn't think, honestly, the beginning of the season, his on-ball defense was great. You could see it was better than it was when he's a true freshman, which is predictable, but he's gotten really good over the course of the season. I thought Michigan State did a much better job in this game defensively on Garcia than they did in the first game, and I'll tell you why. He scored 21 points in the first game. He took a lot of shots to get there, but he was also dog-tired because he had been basically the one-trick pony for Minnesota all those games that Mike Mitchell was out, and they had no scoring with 6 new transfer portal guys, and it was just Garcia, Dawson Garcia, and so he was the only guy. Now, I think they've done a better job with guys like Mitchell coming along and some of the guys coming off the bench, and Lucai Patterson, he's been shooting pretty well lately. I think they've done a better job running stuff for him, for Garcia. They're doing a better job getting him the ball in the mid-post, posting him up more often instead of just letting him resort to threes or drives.
We didn't see much of that tonight.
They tried to. That's where I was getting to. They got one of his. He had two plays where his 2 scoring plays that weren't off of post or off of inbounds plays that he scored on. That he was had 4 field goals in the first half. One was a mid-post play where he put the ball on the floor and he drove to the basket. It was really nice. They set that up and it was kind of open for him. But they're doing a little bit more of that. The thing that I wanted to point out was that a lot of what they wanted to do, what they've had success with him, they weren't able to do because those guards were working so hard to get the ball anywhere where they could make a play. Michigan State's backcourt defense was outstanding, and it wasn't like they were just taking away Garcia. They were taking away Mitchell was stifled, Lucai Patterson was stifled. Nobody could get shots in that first half, and I don't know how you maintain that. It's really hard to maintain it from half to half. But if Michigan State plays defense at that level with that kind of buy-in, there's going to be a lot of teams that have a hard time scoring against Michigan State.
Yeah, a couple of those shot clock violations. One, Jeremy Fears went over a ball screen and kind of funneled the ball into the corner and left them with no options as that clock was ticking down. The other one, I think Minnesota was inbounding. They didn't realize that the shot clock was down to 12 when they inbounded, and Trey Hollman put pressure out to the hash mark out here, and next thing you know, the clock's running out. But the pressure of the Michigan State guards tonight. And Cohen Carr is part of that when he comes off the bench. Played primarily a wing guard today. You go to the bench and bring in Carr, and you get a little bit, I'm not saying you get better on defense, but you get different. And he's bringing, everybody knows about the athleticism, but there's improved awareness as he becomes more and more experienced, and he's a weapon coming off that bench. And you're bringing Cooper off the bench, and the defense is different coming off the bench. It's a problem for opponents.
Yeah, the other thing, too, is I think there's a motivational factor. When Michigan State's playing at defense at as high a level as they were to start out with, everyone coming in off the bench wants to keep that going. There's like, for Xavier Booker, I thought he was dialed in from his first.
Yeah, I didn't see many mistakes from him tonight.
So he was really into that matchup. But there's a motivational factor when you're coming off the bench when you're Cohen Carr, Jace Richardson, Xavier Booker. You want to maintain what is going on, and I thought Xavier Booker was pretty good against Dawson in the first matchup. The one thing that Michigan State has that a lot of teams don't have when matching up against Dawson Garcia is they can throw a lot of different guys at you. So you've got the length of Cooper and Xavier Booker. Then you've got like the athleticism of Cohen Carr.
But you begin with Kohler.
And he was bought in too. And it's really hard to rebound against Kohler when he's really fresh. So I think Michigan State, Dawson Garcia had a good game, but they did a good job on other pieces, and they made him work. They did what they had to do. They made him work for everything. And I know what was he 9 for 16 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But typically he gets a lot more shots, and that's another thing. Like they weren't getting him the ball as much as they have been getting him the ball and featuring him the way they wanted to because Michigan State's defense on the guards were so good.
Now, Carson Cooper led the team with 11 rebounds. He missed 3 free throws. Otherwise, he would have had a double-double. He had 9 points, 11 rebounds.
2 of those were flagrant 1 free throws, and I don't care who you are, but when you're a big guy and you're shooting free throws by yourself at the line, those are harder to make. Harder for anyone to make. But, yeah, he was mad at himself. I talked to him afterwards about that, and he was upset that he didn't get a double-double. But
Has he ever had one before? I should know that, but if he has reason to be upset, he deserved it. He played hard tonight. I don't buy that stuff about big man or free throw, though.
No, I'm just saying.
Because a big man is actually closer to a rim than a little man like me.
Yeah, tell that to Shaq.
It's a longer shot for me.
Okay, anybody by themselves at the free throw line is going to have a harder time with that because you're by yourself.
All right.
And you're thinking, don't miss it.
It's a shorter
I'm by
arc.
myself.
It's a shorter arc in terms of geometry.
I really wonder why bigs haven't shot free throws better than guards then, Joe.
Back in the 70s and 80s, bigs weren't supposed to go out there and shoot, and there was no reason why they shouldn't have. And the Europeans brought into the game, and I'm glad they did, because big guys, there's no reason why they can't be great three-point shooters, and you see that in the world today. Anyway, Kohler, 2 3-pointers in the first half.
Yeah. They're giving it to him.
They're leaving him unguarded on that. He had one on a trail transition situation. One was a pick and pop left wing. Even after he made a couple, they were still giving it to him. There have been times when Kohler's shot and Izzo's not been happy with it. There's other times when Izzo's like, that's the shot we want from you. There's times when it's, maybe not within the flow of things. Izzo might not have the green light on that. But if it's offensive rebound back out to him, which is not going to be very often because he's usually in there for offensive rebounds, mainly transition situations, pick and pops, and the rhythm was there and it looked good. He came into the game 5 out of 25 on 3-pointers this year, 20%. Made a couple today. And like Izzo said when he was asked about it, Booker and Kohler are the 2 guys that can be stretch 4 shooters for us. He's talking about Michigan State. Something that Michigan State does not have, something that his Final Four teams have almost all of them have had except maybe 2001. Booker, I don't know if that's ever going to come around this year. He's kind of a street guy. There might be some game like against Oakland when he goes 3 out of 4 from 3-point range, but it's hard to rely on that. Kohler, at some point in his career, I think is going to be able to make those shots somewhere, wherever he's playing at that point. Goran Sutan couldn't shoot very much. Many 3-pointers when he was a sophomore. Kohler's still basically a sophomore. I know he's a junior, but he's missed pretty much all of last year and was hindered by injury and everything. First year didn't play a lot of minutes. The late great Adrian Payne didn't shoot a whole lot till later in his career. Draymond Green didn't shoot a lot of threes till later in his career. AJ Granger didn't shoot a lot of threes till later in his career. Kenny Goins didn't shoot a lot of threes till later in his career. I'm not shutting the door on Kohler at some point becoming a 35+% 3-point shooter. Maybe not this year, but if it happens, Paul Konyndyk, here in the next few weeks, which we've seen before when we watched Michigan State basketball in our time is over the last 30 years. Sometimes guys get better from February 1st on. It happens. I'm not looking for it, but I'm not closing the door on it. I don't think it's going to happen with Booker. They could use a stretch 4. Any thoughts? Am I getting way ahead of the horse here?
It doesn't happen unless you start making them. And we've seen some of those guys that you mentioned, like Adrian Payne. I can think of some of the games where they played against really good defensive teams like in Ohio State or whatnot. And that's the best shot you could get.
Exactly.
And so you had to make them. And,
exactly.
And I felt like this is one of those games for Kohler.
To stop you right there, meaning like you've run some offense, right. The shot clock's down to 5, and Payne or Granger or Goins has the ball, and there's 4 on the shot clock. Go ahead and shoot it. Can Kohler be that guy?
Right. Later in their careers, obviously sometimes you're a trailer on the break. I get that. Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me too. But in this instance, like Kohler has shot in several of those over the course of the year, and at some point, you're going to just scrap heap that if they don't go in. But in a game like this, where he makes a couple on a night where they're not shooting very well, and they need those to kind of have the momentum go, that's a game changer for him because it's not an isolated thing. It's okay. They're giving me this shot. I'm taking this shot and I'm making it. And so I think there's traction there. And I think I've seen enough of him and how hard he works on his shot and what he can do in the practice gym, where I know that those are shots that he can make at some point in his career. But you're not going to get the green light to do that unless you do it under certain circumstances. And when I think of the history of Michigan State basketball, at least since I've been covering it, a lot of guys that end up being really important stretch elements as a big, they start by making 1 or 2 shots in a game like this. Mm-hmm. I think it's really big for him, his confidence, but I think it's really big for Michigan State, their confidence in him. because Izzo knows how valuable that is in the offense. And it's not like a Marcus Bingham type thing where, he can shoot in the practice gym, but, he just wants to show you that he can do it in a game. This is something I think Kohler can replicate, and it could be important because I, like you, do not think that Xavier Booker is – he might have a couple games where he hits a couple. He might hit one as a trailer. He might hit one when he's open. But, he's not a reliable three-point shooter at this stage in his career.
Mm-hmm. And I like the way Booker, when he gets it in that paint, he's pretty good at depositing it in the rim. I mean, that 6'11" and the leaping ability and the shooting touch, that comes in handy when he gets it in there.
He's got to do it the right way. Like he did a couple times where tonight, like he had a putback of his own miss where he was almost like he touched his hands and he put it right into the rim without any touch. He was like almost spazzed out. Then he got the rebound and put it back in. That's not the way you do it. You got to be able to gather yourself and and do it in rhythm and act like you've been there before.
The first one or the putback?
He had the putback one of his own miss.
I know. Which part did you not like?
I didn't like the first shot, the first part of it. He got the putback, and then later in the game, he looked like he was more comfortable in attacking.
That putback that's talent.
Obviously, it's talent, but against some teams, against a real rim protector, he's not going to be able to get that because it's not going down. But he could make the second shot as a first shot if he does it right. And there's a couple times today where he did drive a little bit and he elevated and had some really good touch on it. And those are all important plays for him. I don't like it when he puts the ball on the floor when he's bracketed by guards on the baseline. He did that a couple times. Got away with it. Got away with it once. He got fouled, but he's got to learn how to balance those aspects, the skilled aspects of his game, and if he can, it's going to be good for Michigan State moving forward.
He had that aggressive swoop to the rim. He didn't score, but I don't hate that.
I don't hate that either.
And what he is now is he's like a 7th, 8th man coming off the bench. At times, that's a pretty good looking 7th and 8th man. If you're the opponent or opposing fans, you're like, who's that guy coming off the bench? That guy's coming off the bench. I know Booker's been a lengthy project, and there's a lot of loose screws there. Didn't see many negatives out of him. He's getting to the point where he's a nice 8th man.
Yeah, for tonight. For tonight. So I'm not ripping him.
One game in a row, Paul.
I'm not ripping him, man. I'm saying if he can do what he did against North Carolina, if he can consistently do that, I'm fine.
If he can do that, man.
If he can do that, that's great. Tonight he was posted up on Lucai Patterson, who's a 6'5" guard or whatever, and he basically, ended up turning the ball over. He's got to get his feel for that, and when he plays the 5, I think it's going to take a little bit for him to get his sea legs down there. But the number one thing with Booker, all this offensive stuff is great. It's awesome. But the number one thing with him is effort and rebounding. Don't let the ball hit the floor when you're in the vicinity. Rebound it with 2 hands. And tonight he, from his very first moment he stepped on the floor, he played with effort, and that's what he deserves props for. Not the skill stuff. We know that he can do that, but the effort. If he can sustain that, then there's going to be a role for him on this team.
Yeah,
a consistent role, consistent minutes.
The first time he went out there, the shot went up. He found his guy, boxed him out. Air ball, had a rebound. I'm telling you, 2 years ago, he wouldn't have looked for a guy to box out.
I know.
So, he's got an open mind. He's working at it. He keeps getting a little bit bigger all the time. And, I always say he's got like a kill switch where sometimes the kill switch just goes off too early. He, stops. I didn't see the kill switch go off tonight. I didn't see any. If I looked closely, maybe I'd find one. But I think this was progress for him a little bit. Yeah. Now, he ended up a decent stat line also for him. Would he have 10 points, 3 rebounds? But I like the way he's just kind of moving around, providing some produce.
Minnesota doesn't have the rim protection they had last year with that big long guy that was, that was like 2 or 3 in the Big Ten in shot blocking. So that's one of the things that you can't attack with some of the things that they've got going on. But this was a good game for him. He needed it. But I was really impressed with what Michigan State did tonight for the most part.
All right, now Trey Hollman, I was watching him tonight, and I'm looking at him. I'm like, that guy's gotten a little bit thicker also. Now he was he was a thin guy coming in, and he's never really been. I've never really thought of him as being a thick guy, but you've always talked about his defense and his wingspan and everything. Today's the first time I ever looked at him. I'm like, looks kind of tough.
Well, he's a football player.
I know he's always had that wiry football toughness about him, but he looked. He had a little Travis Walton thing to him going on a little bit tonight, and then he makes the 3-pointers. But and these guys do get. A 21-year-old guy can look different in February of year 21 than he did in October when we first out here looking at them. And media day and all those things, and these guys can get bigger as the season goes along, and they can change as the season goes along. Hollman's starting to getting a little size to him, playing some defense, doing some good things there. 3 straight three-pointers for him, 4 3-pointers in the first half. And what we saw in the first half, 36-16, we saw a combination. It's a lethal combination, and we only saw it for a little bit of time, but the combination of Michigan State playing really, really good defense, and they're hitting three-pointers. Now, it was only Hollman and Kohler. It was 2 guys hitting three-pointers, and they're going to be streaky there. It's not like these guys are out here, Morris Peterson and Sean Respert shooting and making going 5 of 11 every single night. I'm not talking about that. But when you have that type of defense and you're hitting some threes, you're up 36-16. That's a really good basketball team.
Yeah, and I thought the one thing that
when that happens,
we've been talking about all year long. Michigan State's getting about 19 points, almost 20 points a game from the free throw line. They didn't shoot a lot of free throws in the first half, and they didn't get much. They were given credit for 11 fast break points in that first half, but Minnesota sold out to get back as much as any team I've seen this year. They were 6
of those fast break points were three-pointers.
Yeah.
So, right.
But I mean, they were just like they were selling out like Wisconsin style, or anybody that they were not going to give up transition buckets. So
at the rim,
and I thought they did a great job of. Even though Michigan State scored a lot of points, 72 points in this game, they did a really good job of making guys that they didn't want to shoot the ball. You look at Jeremy Fears took multiple three-pointers in this game. Cohen Carr took multiple three-pointers in this game. They were daring Jackson Kohler to shoot threes. They did not want Jaden Akins to shoot the ball in this game. They didn't want to give him a chance to heat up. They didn't want Jace Richardson or Trey Hollman shooting the ball because Trey Hollman has a knack for doing this against Minnesota. And, so I thought Minnesota did a really good job of forcing other guys you don't want to shoot the ball, or they got the guys that they wanted shooting the ball. So that's another example of what they did better on defense. They really kind of had the blueprint for how to beat Michigan State in a lot of ways. Cut down on those free throws. I know Michigan State ended up shooting 20 free throws in this game, but I think they had 5 or 7 in the first half. 5 or 7 free throws, but the transition points were taken away. They needed Trey Hollman to have some big to have a big game, and I thought for Michigan State to do this against a team that was tied together well defensively was pretty impressive. But Trey Hollman strikes me as a guy. On occasion he's shown that he can create for himself and hit the crazy threes that you don't want to take, but sometimes you have to make. And we've seen him do that throughout the year. He's that one guy that can pop off the dribble, and he's got a lot of swagger to him. You can see it at times when he's in a situation to drive to the basket, or he knows he's got downhill ability. But there's more to Trey Hollman, and we're going to see that throughout the season. But he's got that I can create a shot for myself anytime I want to. He's got a balance, and he does a nice job of it. And I thought Jaden Akins, Izzo said he didn't play good today, but he hit some big shots in the second half when they mattered. Mm-hmm. And to me, we talk about Michigan State being a team that struggles to shoot the ball. A lot of times they struggle to shoot the ball when they don't necessarily need to make a basket. But we've seen throughout the course of the year, there's a lot of times where guys are making shots when they need to make them, like when a team is creeping up on them. And Jaden Akins, he has a quiet night today, but he goes 4 for 9, has 10 points, but he made some big baskets in the second half.
He did. They had just cut it down to 13 points, the deficit. Minnesota did. Izzo calls an angry timeout. Akins had missed a difficult poor shot selection shot with like a fadeaway contested 13-foot fall away, and there's still like 20 seconds on the shot clock. Then they go down, hit a 3. Remember, he missed that one, then he got offensive rebound, came back to him, and missed another 3 right then. And Izzo got on Akins pretty hard. Left him in the game. They ran some stuff. Nothing was there, and Akins ends up hitting a reverse layup right out of that timeout. Two possessions later, he hit a 3-pointer. So Akins did come through after really taking some heat in at that timeout. Now, the thing with Akins here is, like you said, the opponent has him number 1 in the scouting report. And Akins is not a great player. I'm not sure who should be number 1 in the scouting report, but it's Akins.
It should be him.
So he is having trouble, getting uncorked and getting into his offense sometimes. So sometimes he might think, I need to do something. I need to contribute. He might go hunting for a shot that's not there, like that one that I mentioned a moment ago. So the amazing thing about Michigan State with this 13-game win streak is they've had, I think, 7 different guys lead them in scoring during this streak. So like Izzo says, I don't know who you put as the chief guy on the scouting report. I mean, the things Fiddler did against Penn State, they didn't know he was going to do that, right? And Hollman tonight, Hollman hits him. He can do those things against drop coverage. I like what you said about Hollman. If the shot clock's under 5, he's not shy about getting his shot off, and he can get his shot off. It might not go in, but it's good to have a guy like that when the shot clock is down, a guy that can just like threaten some things off the dribble and go ahead and take a station, a shot from three off stationary dribble. It's not a bad thing to have, and he can make some of those. So maybe Akins isn't that guy, but Akins, like Izzo said, didn't have his best game, had 3 turnovers, some of those really unsightly turnovers. So Akins finding – it's weird to talk about a senior who's kind of your go-to guy to find your role, but just knowing when to let the game come to you a little bit more. Right. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but there's a missing part in there somewhere that they need to harness with him and as part of the team.
I don't know. Here's the thing: is
you can't have him making 3 turnovers like that and taking shots like that. If you're playing a good team, you can't have that.
I get that.
You can't throw away possessions.
But it's not like he's like. I mean, he's like 4 for 9, so he's not taking a ton of shots.
He's 2 out of 5 from 3, which is 40%, which helps his percentage, which is good.
Right, and he's above 30. He's like 33 for 33, probably higher now in Big Ten play. But I'm saying like he's not like AJ Hoggard hunting shots or something like that, and he's not like Tyson Walker hunting shots. And I just is he going to be a go-to guy? He consistently has been making shots when they need to be made. Mm-hmm. Now he's not like forcing himself in that role. He's trying to play within himself, and I think he's done a pretty decent job on defense for the most part. The turnovers you can't have them, but I also felt, early in this game there was a couple times where Michigan State was trying to force it in transition. With guys like Jeremy Fears, there's a lot of areas that can be tightened up. There's a lot of guys that need to be a little bit better, but. For the most part, I think that a win for Akins is him not trying to be that guy, not trying to be the guy that if Trey Hollman hits 3 threes, not trying to all of a sudden show him up like AJ Hoggard used to do with Tyson Walker. Oh, hey, Tyson Walker's got us back in this Illinois game. It's my turn to shoot a 3 and show him that I can do it. No, I think he's trying to play his role.
I think that's what I just said. I think he needs to make sure it comes to him and he doesn't go hunting for it too much.
I don't think he did in this game.
Gotta be careful. I agree, not too much, but just some of those passes and the shots, Because Izzo's not happy with him. And Akins is a great kid, and he's going to try to do his best and everything, but they're trying to find the right target there with him.
Yeah, and I think for the most part he's been pretty darn good this year. I mean, defensively, I think a lot of what he does is underappreciated, and he is going to get ripped, and he's going to handle it well. And I think that's another part of his role on this team is he's the leader out there. Izzo's going to rip him because he's got to be at a higher standard than everyone else, but he can take it. And Jaden Akins is not a lot. People try to say, can he do this? Can he do that? I just think he's led the team in scoring more than any other player out there. Mm-hmm. He's the one that's consistently in double figures. And the thing about it is, if you look at his numbers, he's taking like 8 shots fewer than Tyson Walker used to. Mm-hmm. So it's not the win for Jaden Akins, given the pressure he has on him, to try to be that guy as a senior and try to impress NBA scouts or whatever, for him to play within himself, that's one of the reasons why Michigan State is an unselfish team, and one of the reasons why Ben Johnson's lauding Michigan State today for being one of the most connected teams that he's seen. It's guys like Akins that do not want to experience what he experienced with Tyson Walker and AJ Hoggard, and I give him credit for that.
Yeah, to your point, he did turn down some threes today. Not like wide open ones, but you can see like those borderline shots where I've got a shot here, but we're going to look for something else, and he did a good job with some discretion on that one. What else did Ben Johnson say before we wrap up? The Minnesota coach had some really interesting comments about his viewpoints on Michigan State right now.
He loved the crowd. He felt like the crowd, like once they got rolling, he felt like they were really into it. I think that he believes that, and he said the crowd to here today. He said we felt that energy when we played Oregon at home, and we beat them, and we were really feeding off the crowd. He's like the crowd today. Michigan State couldn't help but feed off of that. But he also felt like Michigan State did their part and played tremendous defense. He feels like this is not a team that, based on what he's seen in 2 times playing them, that this is not a team that's going to fracture. That these guys are, like you're going to have your ups and downs like everybody has, but this is a team that cares about each other, is connected, and they're going to play for each other. And he feels like this is a vintage Michigan State Tom Izzo team. And he was really, really impressed. The other thing I thought was impressive, he said this is the first team, in this 3-game winning streak that this stretch of the season where they've done good that hasn't taken Minnesota lightly. And that also speaks volumes of Michigan State, given how much they beat Minnesota at their place earlier this season. So
how could he tell they didn't take it lightly? I know the answer to this, but
I mean, part of it was like defense. He felt like that they could not get into what they wanted to run. Now in the second half, It's impossible to maintain what Michigan State did on defense in the first half, coming on the second half with a 20-point lead. Minnesota did a nice job of getting into what they wanted to run, but in that first half, they couldn't do what they wanted to do, and it was stifling. I think that's the words he described. And for Mike Mitchell, for Dawson Garcia, and those guys didn't have bad games, but Michigan State just turned their water off. This was a vintage performance.
All right, so now Michigan State goes to the West Coast. They play USC on Saturday, then UCLA on Tuesday, and coming back home to play Oregon. It'll be a good time to play Oregon. I mean, the big thing about at the end of a West Coast trip is your next game when you come home. That's when Purdue lost to Ohio State. The good news is when Michigan State comes back home, they're going to be playing a West Coast team that's been traveling themselves. So that helps Michigan State a little bit at the end of that tunnel. But Izzo's been warning about troubled waters ahead and tough times ahead, and he wants to see where his team is when he starts losing some games. And he said he thinks 5 losses will win the Big Ten, and he's not backing away from that. His team has 0 losses in the Big Ten right now. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the West Coast games. USC's been playing some better basketball. What are you anticipating for Michigan State these next 3 games?
USC's really athletic. They have a hard time shooting. Watching them play UCLA last night or the other night. I forget what night it was.
Last night, I think it was.
It was last night. But I just felt like they hit some threes earlier, and they were right in that game with UCLA, and UCLA was daring them to hit threes. They've got some athletes on that team. Claude, the Xavier transfer, Desmond Claude, I really like him as a point guard. He does some nice things with penetration and setting guys up. I think he's starting to come into his own.
Medium range, he killed Illinois for medium range.
Yeah, and he's going to have a harder time getting those shots against Michigan State. I think he's
Akins. Give me guarding him.
Yeah, and that's going to be a good matchup. Those guys will both be into it. And Michigan State's got more guys. You could go in a lot of different ways with that. I like what Michigan State's guards are doing. I think they've got some bigs that are a little bit, that are a little bit tough. They've got some guys that can get after it. Don't shoot really well, but I think it's going to be one of those really physical games. It's kind of like they play an SEC style, which makes sense because our Arkansas coach came over there. But they've got some physical athletes, and I think they're going to before long become a really good program under Musselman. But we'll see what happens. It's a long trip out there. I do like what Michigan State has done in these short turnaround scenarios. Every time there's been a short turnaround or difficulty traveling with the travel, like they had the 8-hour delay out from Rutgers. When they came back here, Izzo was really worried about playing Nebraska, an early Big Ten play, and they ended up putting a 30-point beating on those guys. Michigan State has handled tough situations pretty well. And Izzo was talking about the other day when we were at the press conference. He was talking about, well, this isn't a like a normal second-time prep. For Michigan State's players, it was. They felt like, the veterans, they were all into the scouting report. They knew what they were supposed to do. And even though they didn't have a lot of time to prepare for Minnesota, they took care of business. So I expect Michigan State to go out there looking to make a statement, But at the same time, I do think USC has they have some good defensive players, and they have some good personnel that are going to be tough to match up against. Claude is a tough matchup. He can get guys in foul trouble real quick when he's hot.
All right, we'll see if Michigan State can stay hot. 18-2, Michigan State Spartans, number 7 team in the country, Paul. Not many people expected that, but the strength in numbers is working out quite well, and Izzo is tightening those screws, looking for other areas to get better and better, including Akins. He's on Akins like he used to be with Morris Peterson. Every single thing, getting him still properly programmed, every single thing on the team. And Hollman took some steps today. Kohler took some steps today. Cohen Carr with his defensive expanding role continues to take some steps, and this team gets a little bit better all the time, and Izzo's the best at it when you get toward February, heading toward March. So we'll see what happens as we continue to cover the team. Anything else, Paul?
One last thing about Hollman. He's had some of his biggest games when it's mattered. The North Carolina game, he had 19 points against Illinois. You mentioned the drop coverage early, 17 points, and they needed those points. And then tonight, a big game. He's had other double-figure games, but he does have the ability, I think, to rise up and to score in different ways. And not just a three-point shot, but we've seen a lot more from him this year going to the basket. And, I know a lot of people were critical of him last year that he can't score going to the rim. But unless you do that, unless you get experience doing that, it's harder to do. And I think Jaden Akins is another guy that scored better going to the rim than he did last year.
And Hollman played more minutes than anybody today. I think second straight game, he's playing more and more minutes. And to your point about end of shot clock situations, I'd rather have him making something up than Hogard. I just think when you have to launch something and make something up, he's got the ability to do it.
Because he is still looking for people. I mean, that's one thing to say about even like Jeremy Fears and some of the shots that he took, or anybody, Akins or whomever. They are looking for guys. Like this is like, 10 seconds. They don't already have that switch in their head that I am going to wait till it gets down to this amount of time and then I'm going to shoot. Some guys will do that. They get it with 12 seconds left. Once it gets to 8, it's my ball. I'm going to do something ISO. These guys are looking to make extra passes, and we see tons of examples of that. Even like even a guy getting it inside and kicking it out.
Paul, did you know that prior to the pandemic,
I did not.
Michiganders were taking back their bottles and cans at a rate close to 90%. That has fallen to 75%. That's more than $100 million of unclaimed money and tons of materials that needlessly end up in landfills. Shupan Recycling has been a big supporter of Michigan State athletics over the years, and they are reminding us that one of the beauties of our deposit system is that it creates the cleanest recycling material for the beverage industry to make new cans and bottles. When Michigan's rate drops, it hurts the environment, it hurts all of us. Help the environment, help yourself, take them back. They're your lakes, your roads, and your beaches. Take those bottles and cans back. It's your dime, and it's your time, so take them back. It's worth your time, and everyone will benefit. Take them back, a message from Shupan, a great Michigan company dedicated to recycling. Do you know that, Paul?
Yeah, I'm surprised you don't have that memorized by now.
Yeah, I've got two or three different versions, so no, not quite memorized that. Anyway, continue coverage over at SpartanMag.com. Check us out. Give us a like here on the channel. Subscribe to this channel. Become a SpartanMag.com subscriber as we continue to cover the Spartans, Michigan State football, recruiting, and the transfer portal, and Michigan State hockey, number 2 in the country. Great team there, getting great fan support there. Michigan State women's basketball, the combined records of men's and women's basketball and hockey, it's off the charts right now. Something like 56-8. And nothing but a lot of wins this winter for those teams for Michigan State. And Michigan State's women's team blowing out Michigan this past weekend in Ann Arbor. They're playing Oregon here on Thursday. Go to SpartanMag.com. We'll have coverage and analysis throughout the week and everything else. For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. You've been watching the VCast from the Breslin Center with the Spartans for SpartanMag.com.